Hey guys, it's Yuno, and I have a quick tutorial today on compression. I'm going to go a little bit more in depth on the two main ways that compression is used in a mix. I got a request on one of my videos, and I thought, hey, this would be a good idea to address it, so here goes. But the two main reasons I would say for using compression on a mix, the two main reasons, would be to add a sort of rhythmic or punchy effect, transient, enhance the transient of a sound, or the second reason might be to gel a group of sounds or a mix or a sound in general. So first we're going to start with snare. So not bad. It's a pretty good sample, I would say. Say we wanted to add a little bit more front end punch to it. We could do that by, let's get my CLA 76 here. The settings I'm using here, well, let me play it for you. Obviously, I'm really exaggerating that right there, but what I did there, I set a very high ratio to 20 to 1. What I did there is I set a long attack time and a short release time, and I'll explain a few things first. On the CLA 76, it's actually backwards. On many compressors, the longer attack number represents a longer attack time and the shorter attack time, or the smaller number. But on this, it's actually opposite. So for a long attack time, you'd go to 1, and then for the short release time, I'm going to go to 7. And what that basically means, the attack, is the time it takes for the compressor to react to a sound that goes over the threshold. So, you know, say the sound goes over the threshold and you have a attack of 10 seconds, which is incredibly long. That would mean it would take 10 seconds for that sound, after it goes over the threshold, to be compressed. Well, by setting a long attack time, you're essentially letting the first part of the sound to go through, the punch, more or less. By setting a shorter release time, that basically means that, well, the release time is the time it takes for the compressor to release compressing after the sound level goes below the threshold. So by setting a short release time, it also adds a little bit more of that punch and quick feeling. But basically we're allowing, in this case, what's called the transient to go through. The transient is, again, that first part, that punch. You know, like the snare would be a really transient type of instrument. A kick, maybe a clap, percussion instruments, that kind of stuff. But that's more or less how you would increase the amount of punch on an instrument, generally, of course. You first of all want to start with good samples, but if you want to add just a tad more punch, that's a way to do it. Now, I realize most people don't have really expensive Waves plugins, so I'm going to show you how to do that on a Fruity compressor. So I'm going to go with another drastic ratio here. I'm going to go 8 to 1. Or 8.1, that's close enough. I'm going to set a rather long 190 attack. Turn the threshold down here. So when I do that threshold, when I go up and down with the threshold, it's almost like a dry wet in this case. And don't get the wrong impression. That's not what threshold is on a compressor. It's not a dry wet, but in this case it is, or it's similar to that. And you can hear the effect. So right now the effect is full on. So you see how that kind of sounds, but that's more or less how you would add some punch to your drums, or even you could do that with, say, guitars or pianos, for sort of an interesting effect. You'll hear that a lot, especially nowadays. People sort of experiment with that kind of stuff. You also hear it quite a bit in like 70s type of, like the Beatles. They used some pretty high-end hardware compressors, and you can really hear that. But they didn't use that type of compression. They used more of what we're talking about next, gel type of compression. So for this one, I'm going to play a quick vocal by Neo.
Let's go. Make no excuses now. I'm talking here and now. I'm talking here and now. Let's go. Your time is running out. I'm talking here and now.
Okay, so we have a pretty solid understanding of this, the way that sounds. It's pretty simple and straightforward. A couple harmonies, but for the most part, pretty easy. The next type is gel compression, and essentially this can mean just gelling a group of sounds together, maybe like drum overheads, or maybe it's a group of orchestra players. Maybe it's a mix in general, just everything. But this is the type that you would use, for instance, on vocals. But what I like to use, it also is case by case, but what I like to use is sort of like a medium sounding, maybe a little bit quick attack. Then like to use sort of a medium fast release time. And then with this particular instrument, or sorry, compressor, I can even have a second release time, which I'll explain in a minute. And that is a little bit longer, quite a bit longer, I would say, right here. Also, I have a sort of moderate 2-to-1 ratio. I've done vocal compression where I've almost nearly limited it. I've done some where it's 8-to-1. I've done some where it's 4-to-1. I've done some where it's 1.5-to-1. It just depends on your vocals that you're given, but this is probably a good starting point for us. I turned the threshold down minus 34 dB, and then I have a large knee. The knee basically is how far down the threshold starts, and then from that point up to the threshold, the bottom of the knee up to the threshold, it sort of gradually turns into the compression ratio that you set. So sometimes you're dealt vocals that are just too dynamic. And this is kind of a strange example because I don't talk too much about top 40s music or whatever, but I couldn't help but notice this. When I was in my mall today, I was eating my lunch, and there was that one song, Call Me Maybe, very popular song now. If you listen to that song and you listen to her vocals, you're going to notice, well, if you listen hard enough, you'll probably notice that her vocals are actually hitting a compressor rather hard, pretty compressed there. There are plenty of times where she's speaking softly, and they're almost right in your ear, so to speak, and then when she starts singing really loudly, it's about the same volume, and that's how you can really tell that she has some kind of a compressor on her voice. Well, and that's just one example. Pretty much every song nowadays has compression on vocals, but I wanted to point out that one especially since it is sort of a current thing and it is something that's easy to observe. You're going to hear it at least one time on the radio, probably in the next couple days. So. All right. So now let me put this down here. My recorder. Sorry about that. My recording software was kind of acting up a little bit. But yeah, so vocals in general tend to be actually rather compressed. Like I said, depends on the source. But in this case, I'm just going to kind of gel. He has a lot of harmonies here, and I want to gel it. These are basically more or less unaffected vocals that I was given right here. Very few effects. There's a couple delays, but other than that, dry for the most part. So I'm going to add a little bit of compression just to sort of gel those harmonies together and take away some of the dynamics in his voice. So that his voice is sort of coming out over the rest of the song, even though there is no rest of the song in this case.
Let's go. Make no excuses now. I'm talking here and now. I'm talking here and now. Let's go. Your time is running out. I'm talking here and now. I'm talking here and now. It's not about what you've done, it's about what you're doing. It's all about where you're going, no matter where you've been. Let's go.
And it's very subtle. You can hear especially there at the end where he's that delay on go. Well, let's play it again here for you.
Let's go.
You can hear it quite a bit louder there. And that's, I would say, a perfect example of what the compressor is doing in this case. Basically, anything that's really loud, say if he starts shouting, the compressor would catch that and it would turn it down. And with this compressor, it's really smooth. It's called an RMS feedback type compressor, which I use for almost exclusively for vocals. But enough of that. I'll tell you about that in a little bit. So if he's shouting, it'll turn that down. And then if he starts whispering, even though it doesn't trigger the compressor, if I turn up the volume on the compressor, basically it'll make the whispers sound a little bit louder. I don't know if I'm making myself clear, but essentially what you're trying to do is make whoever the singer is come out over the rest of the instrumentals, no matter how loud the singer is singing. So if a singer is whispering, you're going to want that to still stand out over the guitars and whatever else you have in your song. And you want the shouts, obviously the shouts are going to want to stand out above the rest of the song, but you don't want them to overwhelm everything, so you can use a compressor to sort of handle that as well. So basically it works more or less as a way to sort of put the vocals on top. That's probably the way I like to think about it, is you're putting the vocals on top of the mix by compressing more. And I hope I'm making sense on that. If you still have any questions about that, go ahead and send me a message, send me an email or whatever. But I like these times here. I like the sort of medium, sort of fast attack time. I like the sort of medium fast release, and then I like the sort of slow release. Slow release. And the way that works, some compressors have two release times. The first one is if a sound goes right over the threshold for a little bit of time, it'll go to the fast release time. If it stays over the threshold for a long time, it'll react as the slow release time. But that's more or less how that would work. Um, you can also use this type of principle on a mix after you're done. I generally don't use it on my mixes. I just use mastering limiting on my mixes, but it's up to you. It takes a certain amount of an ear and experience to really know what is good on a mix overall before it's mastered. So I would advise you probably just to leave the compressor off until you really, get your feet wet with it. But more about this compressor. I think it's still free, but it's at Tokyo Dawn Labs, the record label website. And I gotta say, this is probably like my secret weapon when it comes to compressors, because it's just absolutely just handles every single sort of complex input just beautifully. It's very, very subtle, which is what you want with your mix compression. And it's uses the same style as, say, an analog compressor would, which is an RMS detector. If you don't know what that is, don't worry. But at the same time, it doesn't try to really be analog. I've talked to the creator of it many times, and he says it's a proud digital compressor that's just made really, really well with love and care. So go check it out. It's definitely a compressor I recommend. Again, it's my secret weapon. Not too many people know about it, so not a secret anymore. But what else? What else did we have as far as questions? There's a couple other ways you could use compression, but those are the two main ones. The other way would be as more of a limiter, and the way you would use that generally is more often on your mixes, or rather when you're mastering, and you would use that to more or less boost the overall loudness on your track. And I think I've done one tutorial on that already, but I'm going to obviously go over that more in the mastering series. But that's more when you're dealing with like an infinity to 1 ratio as opposed to like a 3 or a 4 to 1 ratio. I hope I answered some questions. If you have any questions still, go ahead and send me a message and I'll be happy to help you out. But I think that's pretty much it. I know I went pretty fast. It's a 20-minute tutorial, but I feel like I covered mostly everything. So on that note, if you have any suggestions for tutorials, if you have any sort of requests, anything like that, go ahead and message me. And then, as always, I'd always appreciate if you could check out my music. All the links will be in the description. And then I will love you even more if you could buy my music. So I'd appreciate that. And as always, I'm working on some right now. Well, I could just show you a little bit more of what the soft compressor would do. But yeah, different compressors you're going to find have different styles of, they have different characters. For instance, the TDR here, it's very smooth, it's really transparent, you can barely hear it even though it does its job of really bringing out vocals. It's still really, really subtle. If you don't know what you're listening for, you might not hear it, which is perfect, and it's why I love using it on vocals. It's that subtlety that is just amazing. There's Fruity Compressor. Again, that is a very proud digital compressor as well. This one's a little bit more straightforward, a little bit more generic, but it works really well for creating more or less a punchy sound, I would say. You can use it for anything, but I like it for punchy. You can change the knee types here, but hard would be more of a punchy type, and soft would be more for like a mix, and then there's in between, of course. And then there's just different compressors out there for you to check out. Different release times, different attack times, and then also harmonic distortion that's created when there's compression taking place are all sort of what add up to the overall character of various types of compressors, as you'll see with waves, plugins, and various things like that. But that's pretty much it. That pretty much sums it all up. So thanks for watching, and I will see you guys